Hey everyone, welcome back to another week of the Triple Play. This is Danielle. Today there's a lot to cover. There's also some breaking news regarding Florida football. We'll get to that right after we're done talking about the game this past weekend against the Gators. Really close loss. Brings us to a decade of losing to the Gators, which is really heartbreaking for any UT fan, but that's just the way it goes. Like we've been doing so far this year, we have two new members sitting in on the show this week, so I'm going to have them introduce themselves. We'll start with Alex.
My name is Alex Skidmore. I'm from Kingsport, Tennessee. I'm a sophomore at UT, majoring in journalism.
Okay, and Sam?
I'm Sam Forman. I'm a fifth-year senior majoring in journalism from Kodak, Tennessee, and hopefully heading towards ESPN one day.
Awesome. So welcome to the show. Right now we're going to go ahead and focus on the game this weekend against Florida. It was a 10-9 loss. It was just a weird game in general. Offense, just, I don't know what it was. There were plays that were made, but just nothing was really executed all that well. It really just came down to our kicking game. Aaron Medley was on the field 3 different times. All of his field goals were for 36, 38, and 39 yards, so not too bad for him. Justin Worley was sacked 6 times, which was pretty incredible. Not a good stat that you ever want to have on that stat line. He was 26 for 39 with 2 interceptions for 205 yards. For the receiving end, Pig Howard was pretty much the top guy for the game, 6 attempts with 79 yards. Looking at rushing, very less than spectacular, averaging 1 yard per rush, 28 yards for 29 attempts. Pretty sad to look at that stat line, in my opinion.
Definitely is. And as the series has gone on versus Florida the past couple of years, it's always been the team that is able to run the ball wins the game, and it's just been Florida the past couple of years.
Yeah, there's been a lot of could-have situations for Tennessee, especially the last several years. Another one this Saturday. I mean, it was really best described, I think, a heartbreaking loss for definitely the fan base. I mean, Neyland Stadium was rocking. That's one of the loudest times I've ever heard Neyland. And, I mean, the checkerboard, Neyland, phenomenal. You had a great atmosphere. But the game, once again, just heartbreak for Tennessee and falling apart at the end yet again for a second straight week makes it even worse.
Yeah, but going back to, different plays in the game, I know most of the students and a lot of the fans, too, that were there in general were talking about the refs and the missed calls, especially in the fourth quarter whenever Austin Hardin went for a field goal and the play clock ran out. It was obviously at 0 for quite some time before the ball was even snapped, but that field goal ultimately was the final straw. It put the Gators up 10-9 to pretty much win it with 6:20 left in the fourth. It was just, I feel like if we could have had that play back, if that could have went to where there would be, the call was made, it could have been the game changer. We still could have had a chance.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's back-to-back games for Florida that they've technically won it on a field goal that should not have counted because the play clock was at 0. I mean, it's been SEC officiating crews both times. To me, that's just absolutely unexcusable by the officiating crew. That play specifically, there were some other very questionable calls. I do give them credit early in the game on the targeting with going back and reviewing it. That definitely wasn't targeting. So they did do a good job there, but there were just a lot of questionable no calls that Tennessee didn't get and calls that Tennessee got called on them throughout the entire game. Just questionable officiating throughout the entire time.
Yeah, the field goal was long and it drifted to the left the whole time. You got to wonder if it was 5 yards back, could it have knocked off the post? Mm-hmm. There was the first interception in the end zone, it looked like the defensive back shoved Marquez North down to take it away. Somebody, I don't remember if it was Jalen Hurd, but somebody got tackled and pulled to the ground hard 5 yards out of bounds, no flag. It just seemed like the calls were going against us most of the game.
Definitely. Also, looking at the defense for us, very impressed by the fact that Driscoll threw 3 interceptions, 1 to Reeves Maben, 1 to Cam Sutton, and then Todd Kelly Jr. got an interception for 21 yards, which was incredible. I don't think I've ever been more hyped for an interception in college football than I was in that moment. Really thought he could run it back. Really excited by that. But Florida's offense, I don't know what it was with Driscoll. We always expect him to come out and be almost stellar. But this time around, not too great. 11 for 23 with 59 yards and 3 interceptions, like I said. Trayon Harris came in and replaced him. I don't remember what quarter it was, but he pretty much led. It was the fourth quarter, that's right.
Yeah.
But he led the scoring drives for Florida. So that happened. But overall, I think it was a very, very hard-fought game for the Vols. I like what I'm seeing from the team. Aaron Medley, great foot on him right now. I love what I'm seeing from him, but there just needs to be more from the offense. But like Coach Jones was saying earlier during the weekend after the game, you can't just put all the blame on one department of the team. Everybody has their jobs that they have to go after, and they have to execute everything. But, I mean, right now, it's another moral victory, which we talked about last week, how we still don't need more of those, but it's what we have, and it's what we have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a great effort by the team overall. I mean, there's a lot of, once again, I think maybe the more frustrating thing than a moral victory or how close we came is it's another game of, well, we never should have been in this situation to begin with. I mean, you can make a valid case. Tennessee should have been up 21-0 at one point. I mean, the defense overall played great. I don't think they played as good as they did against Georgia. A lot of guys had a phenomenal game again. You mentioned the 3 interceptions, but there were a lot more missed tackles than we've seen throughout the season so far. I mean, and the Tennessee defense has just found a way to shut Jeff Driscoll down whenever we play him. And offensively, you know, the line has shown some improvement, but you've got to give Worley the chance to throw the ball, which comes back to limiting your play call. I mean, Worley, to me, did not look like he was 100% with that elbow. It looked like he was forcing it some, which caused some of those overthrows, and just wasn't able to get the right amount, you know, of power into his throws with some of those ones that came up short, and I think some of the interceptions. So you've got to wonder, you know he's not 100%, you got to wonder how well he was. But once again, the bright spot on the offense was Worley showing how tough he is. And then, you know, Jalen Hurd getting hurt either doesn't help you in that game either.
1 point.
Mm-hmm.
We just needed 1 point.
Right.
One more point. Send it into overtime. But I really like the way the team continued to fight throughout it all, and just the competitiveness that they've shown. A.J. Johnson, Kurt Maggitt, Jalen Reeves-Maben, one of the best linebacking cores, I think, in the country. They've been shutting down, like they held Todd Gurley pretty much in check on long runs last week. And then Jeff Driscoll, I kept having flashbacks from 2012, thinking he's going to, every time he ducked his head, I thought he was going to take off for another 80 yards. But they held him in check pretty well. Cam Sutton, about 9-minute mark of the fourth quarter, almost has a pick six, but he knocks the ball down. And you could see him getting on himself. I should have had that, but go back and fight the next play. They're going down to kneel the ball, and Jordan Williams slaps the ball out of the center's hand. They want it so badly, and to have it be that close and just slip away from us again, it's very demoralizing. But I'm sure they're going to come back and fight, and Lord help Chattanooga.
Yeah, definitely. But one, with this being like a heartbreak, which of course it is, the one little bright spot that we could look at is this is the first time since 1955 that the Gators have been shut out by the Vols in the first half. That's a little glimmer of hope that we can hold, but still very disappointing loss. But I like what I'm seeing from the team. Yeah, definitely Chattanooga should be interesting this weekend. It's homecoming week, which is always really exciting here in Knoxville. But looking at Chattanooga, I personally don't know that much about the team. They're 3-2 right now. They've had wins against Austin Peay, Samford, and VMI. Pretty good victories, too. Their only close game, substantially close game, was against Jacksonville State. It was a loss in overtime, 26-23 back in September. But I think it'll be nice playing a team like UTC. I've heard good things about them, and I've heard bad things about them. So it's all kind of really mixed right now. But I think it could be a really exciting game nonetheless. So like I mentioned at the very beginning of the show, there was some breaking news involving Florida. Trayon Martin, who came in to replace Driscoll, like we were talking about, has been suspended indefinitely from the team. There's no complete official word, but as of right now, there was a statement released saying that it was due to sexual assault charges that I believe were called in on Saturday night. But it became known pretty much yesterday, but it was really put out there around noon today, about noon or 1 o'clock. So there should be more on that sometime soon. As of right now, all we know is that it was a sexual assault case. Really interesting, especially with it happening right after this game. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Moving on to the SEC, this weekend was insane.
Oh, you got that right.
There were there were like 3 big upsets that I can think of. The state of Mississippi should be very, very happy right now with how football's going there. We'll start off with Mississippi State beating Texas A&M, a number 12 beating a number 6, 48-31. I don't think many people were expecting this to happen, especially in the way that it did.
Not at all. But Dak Prescott definitely showed up, Kenny Hill, and they just owned their stadium and let the cowbells ring, and Texas A&M seemed pretty lost.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I can attest from personal experience, being in Starkville, Mississippi, you may not think it, but that's one of the most intimidating and nerve-rattling environments in the SEC with those cowbells. I mean, for Kenny Hill, the thing that really hurt him, they both did great. Kenny Hill was 37-62, so the Aggies threw it in the air the entire time, and he threw for 4 touchdowns and 365 yards, but it was the 3 picks that really hurt A&M. You mentioned the play at Prescott. Obviously, he was their passing leader, but he was their rushing leader as well. Prescott has done everything for this Mississippi State offense the entire year, and definitely, you got to think he's moving closer and closer to a potential your next SEC quarterback Heisman winner.
Yeah, and if Dan Mullen is able to keep them playing well next year after Prescott and their defensive line leaves, hats off to him. Give him a lifetime contract. Mississippi State.
Definitely. Going to another game in Mississippi, the biggest one of the weekend, I would say, in the SEC, Ole Miss, number 11, mind you, beating Alabama, who's number 3 in the nation, 23-17. Phenomenal win for Ole Miss. They are now 5-0 overall, 2-0 in the SEC, which I would have never expected. As Andrew and I were talking last week, Ole Miss is always a team where they're either going to be a huge threat or they're just going to be a nothing. But this year, we could see them going fairly far. I would say it's still a little early to really say anything with that, but Bo Wallace, incredible. 18 for 31, 251 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Completely insane. My dad pointed out to me after the game that it's a little fitting that Bo Wallace is a quarterback that Lane Kiffin did not want, and so he comes out and beats Bama, who Kiffin is with right now, but I just thought that was a little bit of karma, which is always nice whenever it comes to Mr. Kiffin. Oh. But, yeah, overall, great game for Ole Miss.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kiffin. This is really, as much as I hate to say it, the first game since he's been at Bama, he really has had some questionable play calling and hasn't been able to get the Alabama offense in a place where they can have success. Sims was 19 of 31, 228 yards, no touchdowns, the 1 interception. Ole Miss, they never gave up in that game. They came back. They controlled Yeldon and the great running backs that Alabama does have. You got to think Alabama's not done in the West. I don't think the West is settled by far. Obviously, right now, the front runners are Ole Miss and Auburn. But, you got to look at that game as if both teams could stay undefeated at that point. Imagine that game, the Tigers and the Rebels. But, Ole Miss definitely pulled one out of the hat I don't think a lot of people were expecting. And, you hit the nail on the head. Ole Miss has always been an up or down team. Third in the West or dead last, sometimes second. And you had to think they were the dark horse favorite out of the West this year. But to actually have a shot and be maybe the best shot to go to Atlanta, definitely didn't expect this from this Ole Miss team.
Neither of the divisions are settled right now. The East, mainly because everybody's not really good and really competitive, and the West because they're all really good and very competitive. Mm-hmm. If you had told me before the season that Ole Miss would be number 3 at one point, having just beaten Bama, right as we're about to go play them in Oxford, I would have said, Tennessee. It seems about right.
Definitely. Moving on, we've mentioned Gurley a bit. Georgia beat Vanderbilt 44-17. pretty big win. Everybody expected, I would say, but Gurley he had 25 carries for 163 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is just making him a little bit stronger for the Heisman. He's still up there with Marcus Mariota. We still have quite a while until we have to worry about the Heisman, but he's really putting his name out there, and I think it's really interesting. Looking at other games in the SEC, Auburn beat LSU 41-7. Not much of a surprise. I really thought LSU would come out and fight a little bit harder than they did, but nonetheless, really big win for Auburn. But the game that surprised me the most was Kentucky beating South Carolina. My dad is a Kentucky fan, so we've been looking forward to this game for a little while because he's been thinking maybe we'll have a chance to beat them. And I'm just like, well, Dad, I don't know. But Kentucky this season, I don't know where these players are coming from, but they have changed this program. What scares me the most with Kentucky, it was a 45-38 win for Kentucky. They're now 4-1. Overall, 2-1 in the SEC, which is incredible. But what surprises me is how they can run now. I have never expected to see this much of a running game from Kentucky. They had 239 rushing yards. Not bad in comparison to South Carolina's 282. But overall, I mean, this Kentucky team, huge surprise this year.
Well, I mean, Kentucky went in, they're looking for a fist fight, and that's what they got. I mean, it was kind of a lack of defense throughout the entire game from both teams. And, I'm still not sure. I mean, this is a very much improved Kentucky team from we're used to seeing. I knew when Kentucky hired Stoops, he was going to get that program to new heights, kind of like Franklin did at Vandy. And I'm not saying by any means Kentucky's there because I still don't feel confident saying Kentucky's there. But then again, who thought Kentucky would be ahead of Tennessee in the SEC standings at this point? Who would have suspected anything that happened in the East so far? But I mean, Kentucky went in there and they matched South Carolina punch for punch. And Dylan Thompson, is this more of a question about how bad he is or how bad the Gamecocks are versus how good the Wildcats are? I mean, Thompson, 3 interceptions.
Yeah.
The mistakes have been what shot South Carolina in the foot over and over again this season. It happened when they played Texas A&M to open the season. It happened again Saturday night against Kentucky. And, I mean, with a team with the athletes that Kentucky has now, you can't give them those kind of opportunities to go in, get good field position, and capitalize on turnovers because, unlike Kentucky teams of the past, they're going to capitalize on those now.
Definitely. And when Stoops took the job and went through his first season last year, it looked like same old Kentucky, but you could see during the offseason he really tried to take over the state in recruiting, stole Matt Elam, defensive tackle from Alabama, stole Drew Barker away from us in South Carolina, took over the state, took them away from Louisville, away from Western Kentucky where they had been going, and said, okay, come here and we'll build something special together. And they're starting to do that, and they're starting to believe. They do have a rough stretch of schedule coming up where they have to go to LSU. They've got to play Mississippi State, then at Missouri, and then Georgia before coming here to play us. And may I just say, I'm really glad we don't go to Commonwealth Stadium this year. I'd be extremely scared if we were.
Definitely. And Commonwealth is usually not the place that you'd think of to be really, I guess you could say, electric, but it looks like Commonwealth is becoming a lot more like Rupp Arena. Maybe they'll start filling up seats a little bit more, but SEC, definitely exciting. But we weren't the only conference that had a lot going on. If we just look at the whole NCAA standings in general, out of the top 25 teams that were in the top 25 last week, 11 of them got beat this week. I've never seen this happen before. So many upsets. For instance, we had Oregon losing, Alabama losing, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, UCLA, Stanford, LSU, USC, Wisconsin, BYU, and Nebraska. Absolutely insane.
Oh, well, and I mean, with this new switch to the college football playoffs and the whole Final Four thing, it killed the Big Ten. Nebraska was the lone unbeaten team, so Michigan State being the one to beat them, you can maybe make a case it helps them as the only team left in that conference with a legitimate shot to get in, however slim it is. And, I mean, with Oregon losing to Arizona 31-24 on Thursday night, UCLA was back in the driver's seat as the team to have a chance out of the Pac-12. They blew it against Utah. And now, this week, you have Oregon versus UCLA. one of them, the loser of that game, is out. There's no way they're getting into the college football playoff. The winner of them still has a slim chance and probably the best chance from the Pac-12. But a couple of conferences just saw any shot to get into the first ever college football playoff go right down the drain. And, I was sitting there thinking, could BYU, if they get in undefeated, they may not have as strong of a schedule and they may not have as many signature wins. I mean, there'd be some people out there I think would say their best signature win was against ACC, against the ACC in Virginia. But Utah State, I mean, that really kind of makes us look better. I mean, we stomped them and they beat BYU 35-20, knock off number 18. That one definitely a shocker, maybe the biggest of the week besides Arizona beating Oregon for the second straight year.
Definitely. It was like all of 2007, the year of the upset, shoved into 1 week. Everybody they started dropping like flies, and it was upset Saturday, and we were one of the teams who lost. So I guess it was upset Saturday.
And I mean,
should have taken them down.
And even some teams that, you expected to lose, got blown out a lot more than you were expecting it to. I mean, I was expecting Kansas State to beat Texas Tech 45-13. But, I really was definitely not expecting LSU to only score 7 points against Auburn and give up 41. So it was a bizarre week in college football, even for the teams that were expected to lose, but definitely for those that were favored to win.
How about the Arizona State Hail Mary to beat SC at their place?
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. Thing of beauty right
Felt
there at the
really
end of that
good.
one.
Felt
And,
really good.
USC was doing so good in this, sort of, we're over Kiffin look. It was definitely Kiffin's fault. Case being made. Look at the difference in 1 year of essentially the same players. Never mind. Kind of get the upset to Arizona State in the last minutes. Sun Devils, they're a sneaky, dangerous team.
Definitely.
Yeah. Looking around the whole NCAA college football scores, we have, like you mentioned, Oregon losing 24-31 to Arizona, BYU losing to Utah State 35-20. Florida State is still just being stellar. They beat Wake Forest 43-3. That was not expected to be a close game at all. I'm honestly surprised that Wake Forest even put any points on the board, but that's just me.
You're not alone in that one.
It was 3-3 at halftime, and we started thinking, is it going to be an actual upset Saturday? And then
Jameis happened. Yeah.
And
then
Jameis
Jameis.
happened.
Very good point. TCU, big shock for me, beating Oklahoma 37-33. I love seeing that from TCU. They're always a threat. I'm surprised that they were only at a 25 going into this game, but I mean, they've really turned around their program. They're 4-0 right now. They're 1-0 in the Big 12. I'm really excited to see what we can see for the rest of the season from TCU. Baylor beat Texas 28-7. UCLA, like we said, they lost to Utah. That was pretty big win there for Utah, who's now 4-1, and they are 1-1 in the Pac-12. Stanford lost to Notre Dame. 17-14. That was a really interesting game to watch. Notre Dame is still undefeated. So that's basically some of the bigger games that happened this weekend. But if you look at the AP ranks now, Florida State is number 1. Auburn is number 2, moving up from number 5. Right now there's a tie for 3rd between Mississippi State and Mississippi, which is very interesting. I was not expecting that.
I'm surprised the whole state hasn't just imploded
right
now.
Yeah, the amount of discussions and arguments that are going on right now in that state between Rebel fans and Bulldogs has got to be an intense location to be in right now, because both of them are sitting there claiming the rights to that 3rd place and saying, no, we're the real best team in the state of Mississippi.
Right. Going down the list a little bit more, TCU, who was number 25 last week, is now number 9. Arizona was not even ranked, and now they're number 10.
And that one I don't understand that one. I mean, I realized they beat Oregon, and it was for the second year in a row, but from unranked to number 10, I question that one. I don't like it. I think they definitely are a top 25 team. I think they should probably be in the teen range somewhere. But top 10, I just can't agree with that one. I don't see a way you can make the case for that to be right. Even if they were sitting at 26, I think there's too many other good teams. TCU, I agree with making that big of a jump. But, I mean, that's a little bit questionable there to me.
Definitely. Mariota just fumbled away the game, but Hopefully not the Heisman on his part.
Well, 2 potential Heisman quarterbacks from the Pac-12 potentially losing any shot they had at a Heisman.
Yeah.
I mean, UCLA and Oregon both.
Yeah.
Looking at other movements on the rankings, Oregon moved from number 2 down to number 12. Alabama moved from number 3 to number 7. It's just pretty much a whole shakeup for the whole thing in general. Very interesting to see. There's a lot of undefeated teams on there, but I mean, the lowest ranking I'm seeing is 3 and 2 for Stanford, who was number 14, but now they're number 25. So, should all be really interesting to look at. For the teams who dropped out of the top 25, LSU is out, Southern Cal is out, Wisconsin, and BYU. So that's all a bit surprising, but not really that much of a surprise based on what happened this weekend. But definitely a big weekend for college football, a lot of upsets. Hopefully it'll be just as exciting next weekend. But we're going to go ahead and move to the NFL real quick. Pretty big weekend for the Titans, you could say, even if it was a loss. It was a very close game. I'll give them that. But against the Browns, don't know if there's a lot to be proud of because it is the Cleveland Browns.
I mean, you give up the biggest comeback in the history of the Browns organization, and I mean, you want to talk about how long the Browns have been around. I mean, that was definitely a game of ups and downs, and we talked about how much the Florida loss was a heartbreaker for Tennessee fans. I mean, for people who follow the Titans, just as much of a heartbreaker there. I mean, you had guys who did pull off great performances, definitely some bright spots with Wright and Hunter. Both came out, had good games. I mean, Hunter went for 99 yards on just 3 receptions and a touchdown. But, I mean, the Browns, I can't quite put my finger on Cleveland right now. They're definitely, I want to call them a contender sometimes, for their division.
But then it's Cleveland.
But then again, yeah, like you said, it's Cleveland. I mean, my dad is originally from Cleveland, and he doesn't really follow the Browns, but he still likes them. And I hear all the time, it's like, well, doesn't matter. Cleveland will screw it up at the end. And this is one time where they just didn't. They pulled it out, and it was shoe on the other foot, and the Titans continue to just get off to a bad start again.
We were leaving the game on Saturday, and my buddy and I said, well, the Titans are going to lose tomorrow, so we may as well not watch. We turned it on in the second quarter, and we were up 28-3. We're like, awesome.
Then Cleveland
And
happened.
then that happened.
Right. Definitely.
Both the Vols and the Titans gave up leads to lose by 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
I almost didn't get out of bed this morning.
Yeah, a rough week for Tennessee sports in general. I mean, football team for UT, football team for the Titans. Lady Vols don't do good in volleyball either, losing two matches over the weekend. Rough week to be a Tennessee anything sports fan.
Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt lost as well.
Vanderbilt remained Vanderbilt.
Right. Looking at other games before we move to the big games for some VFLs that we're playing this weekend, namely being Peyton Manning and Jason Witten, two of the ones that I hold closest to my heart, I must say. I'm a Pittsburgh fan, like I've mentioned before. They beat Jacksonville 17-9. I thought that was a really interesting game to watch. I got really worried. I missed the whole first half, and it was not looking pretty, so I'm glad I had to miss it. But they ended up rallying. Antonio Brown still, I don't know how he's human. 5 receptions for 84 yards, but those stats may be low, but if you watch the way he plays, it's incredible. Ben Roethlisberger, he had an okay game. He threw 1 touchdown. Not too bad, though. He had 273 yards total. I don't really know what to expect from the Steelers team. I mean, we were potentially about to lose to 2 winless teams back-to-back, and that's not good for a team at all. But as a Steeler fan, I don't really look at this game as improvement. I look at it as just like it's an all right win. But yeah, so win there for the Steelers. But we're gonna go ahead and talk a little bit about the game that happened last night. The Patriots ended up beating the Bengals 43-17. Tom Brady had a very interesting game. He broke into the 50,000 career yardage mark. He now has 50,232 yards on the career for passing. Not too shabby for him. The Bengals looked really down, which was kind of surprising. considering how much success they've had like in the beginning of the season. Not expecting that from a team like Cincinnati has, but kudos to them for a good start. But again, kudos to Tom Brady on breaking that milestone. But talking about some balls in the NFL, we'll start with Jason Witten, who's now the third tight end in NFL history with 10,000 career reception yards. The Cowboys won the game yesterday against Houston 20-17. Big win for Dallas. They've been really surprising this year. I'm not expecting them to like win this much. Don't know what's happening. Don't know what happened to Tony Romo. This must be some kind of just like complete change of foot for him, but I think this is what Dallas has been looking for, and it was in overtime too. That's just really impressive for them. And then looking at Peyton, of course, another record has been broken. I think he should be breaking a record for how many records he's breaking. He is now at 504 touchdowns for his career. He's the second quarterback to be in the 500 mark. So the next one he has to bypass is the top one that I know of, and that's Brett Favre with 508 touchdowns on his career.
It's only 4 away.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that within 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
I'd say.
If even. He couldn't get it in 1 week.
Get it in 1 week. Yeah.
I was thinking at one point during this week, it's like he's going to get it all right here, right now.
Right.
But, I mean, Peyton with a great game. Of course, I mean, you almost come to expect those. I mean, he's the best quarterback, if not, depending on your opinion, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. I mean, you did mention Tom Brady. And I think it was more about answering questions for him this week. He really came out after the disaster that was the last game for the Patriots. Rumors starting to circulate of, will Brady even finish his career in New England? Is he washed up? Is it over? Where do the Patriots turn from here to, hello people, I'm still Tom Brady. One of those performances. And, for Jason Witten, he got off to a slow start this season. Great for him, obviously. I mean, he's one of the best tight ends to ever play the game. Obviously, only the third tight end to ever reach that mark in yardage. And, I mean, you mentioned Dallas. I mean, it was a disaster after week 1. They lost, and it was the reaction that Vandy had of, well, let's fire Derek Mason. It was, everything's over, the season's ruined, everything's done. Once again, we're not going to the playoffs. All of a sudden, the complete turnaround, and you got to say this Dallas team right now looks for real in an NFC East that I don't think anyone thought was going to be any good this year. All of a sudden, the Skins are garbage. The Eagles, the Giants, and the Cowboys have all of us saying, where did they come from? I mean, the Eagles you expected it from, but I mean, this looks like a 3-team race all of a sudden already when we all thought the Eagles had the division at the beginning of the year.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Moving on to the MLB. Well, first, before we go on to that, tonight there's a big Monday night game between the Seahawks and the Redskins. I think everybody's picking the Seahawks to win. Maybe the Redskins could have a miracle and turn it around and just completely demolish them. But I'm saying right now Seattle will most likely win that. But should be interesting. Just an overall fairly normal weekend for the NFL. It wasn't much of a surprise this weekend like college football was, but still very exciting nonetheless. But now we're going to go ahead and talk about the MLB playoffs, which have been crazy and wild and exciting. But speaking of wild, we'll talk about the wild card race first, which happened last week. The first game that we saw was Oakland and KC. I really did not expect the Royals to come out like they did. I mean, they were struggling the whole game. They go into extras and they win. They come back and rally. 9-8 win. Very interesting for the Royals, who have, since then, they have just been insane. They really want this. They want the title. But looking at the NL, my Pirates took on the Giants, and it was not pretty. Giants won 8-0. One stat that really hurt the Pirates, I would say, was the Giants had 11 hits in the game, and the Pirates only had 3. And I believe 2 of those came from Josh Harrison. 1 was from Jose Tabata. I know Harrison had 1. I know that Tabata had 1, but I think Harrison had another one as well. But just a struggle for the Pirates, but the Giants are looking really good so far. Going into the ALDS, Baltimore swept Detroit in 3 games, and Kansas City also swept the Angels in 3 games, which kind of stinks because I had the Angels as a contender to win it all. But, I mean, great season so far for Kansas City, who I think really could be the dark horse for this whole playoff system. But I mean, there's a lot still that has to go on. I mean, next we're going to be seeing Baltimore and Kansas City going against one another, and those are two shutout teams. They are incredible. And then looking over at the NLDS, San Francisco is leading the Washington Nationals 2-0 in the series. San Francisco could win it tonight, potentially. That'll be really exciting to see. And St. Louis is taking on the Dodgers, and that series has been really exciting. Right now it's tied 1-1, but honestly, these are two teams that, no matter who wins, we could see them in the World Series. Cardinals, they have magic in October. It's tough for me to say because I'm a Pirates fan, but they are one fun team to watch in October. It's just, that's their month.
They just find a way. I mean, the Cards have always been able to do that. They just find a way to win it. But, you know, I picked the Dodgers personally to win, to get to the World Series and win the World Series. And, you know, I mean, it's tough to think right now. At the end of the night, we could be saying 3 of the 4 series were sweeps. I mean, you were thinking maybe, you know, in the wild card, is it more about the historic collapse we saw from the Athletics than, you know, KC? But KC has proved they are for real. You know, definitely, I mean, that may be the best matchup we get in all of postseason is, you know, the Royals and the Orioles. But you can't look away from this Dodgers-Cards series.
Definitely not. And sometimes you have to stop saying, well, this could happen or this could happen, and just sit back and watch and be like, I don't care what happens. Something's going to happen, and it's going to be amazing.
And that's the beauty of the MLB playoff. I mean, you see fans that are in the stands now. I saw one guy the other night. I don't remember what game it was, but his sign, all it said was, I love baseball. And I think right now this is the time of year where we all love it.
It's the
but like
magic of October.
That is very true. But we'll see what happens with the NLDS. It should all come hopefully to a close tonight with the Giants winning, but we'll still have to see what we can get out of St. Louis and LA. But other than that, that's basically it for this week. We will see you next week.